Hello, and welcome to an adventure. How is everyone today? I hope that you're ready to go traveling through time, which is oddly a lot of what we usually try to do on this stream, only I think we're doing it slightly differently this time. Sorry, I'm just double checking to make sure that the captions are on, and it appears that they are. So let me see who's here. Matt M33, hello, it is good to see you. Are those? Is a bird. Sorry, you put emotes in and they have birds, so they're very distracting. But thank you. Also, Obi, it's good to see you. Hello. Hannah, hi. Elixir, it's good to see you. And yeah. Welcome to Archival Adventures. We are live on 2 channels. Twitch.tv/VTUL Studios, as well as twitch.tv/Rogue127. One is the Virginia Tech University Libraries channel, and one is my personal channel. I am the Community Collections Archivist at Virginia Tech, so that would be why we are on both channels. And this is the once-a-week show where we explore things from the archives, and you're live from Scotland. Ooh. I mean, we regularly visit live from Scotland when I raid into to Stephen Joyce. But are you're not normally in Scotland, are you? I thought you were elsewhere in the UK, but it doesn't matter. Scotland is quite pretty from all of the photographs that I've seen. I have yet to get to the UK. Brain. I need to do the opening things. Ooh, you're vacationing in Edinburgh? That sounds like it would be amazing. I'm not going to be distracted. I am, but first, since we look at historical items here, and the items we look at are owned by Virginia Tech Special Collections and University Archives, we just like to acknowledge the history of the institution. So Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutelo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of native nations from their lands in California and other areas in the West. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations, owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. Enslaved Black people generated resources that financed Virginia Tech's predecessor institution, the Preston and Olin Institute. And they also worked on the construction of its building. And of course, that is the shortened version of the official university land acknowledgement and labor recognition, which should still be there. Things have been changing, but so what are we looking at today? Well, today, from the archives, we're diving into a speculative fiction story. This is number 9 in our series, because if you recall, in the past, we had taken a moment. We were looking at Comet, one of the spec fiction pulp titles in our collection. And so we were looking at that just to see what was in it and, just explore a little. And it was issue number 1 from December 1940, and we discovered a letter to the editor, which amazing. You had letters to the editor in your very first issue, but the letter was from a prominent speculative fiction or science fiction critic in 1940. His name was Sam Moskowitz, and in it, he listed a bunch of stories that he called classics of science fiction, all of which had been published in Astounding Stories and edited by F. Orland Tremaine, who was the creator of this new magazine called Comet. And so, I'm sorry, all of the stories he was calling classics were at best 7 years old. And so that sparked some curiosity. Like, what is classic after only 7 years in a relatively new genre? So once a month, we've been looking at the stories. And so far, we've looked at Farewell to Earth by Donald Wandre, Colossus by Donald Wandre, Rebirth by Thomas Calvert McClary, Manna from Mars by Stanton Coblentz, He from Procyon by Nat Schachner, Succubus by K.F. Ziska, Rex by Harl Vincent, and last month was Man of Ages by K.F. Ziska. And you know, so far, they've all at least had elements that have become tropes in science fiction or speculative fiction storytelling to this day. So I do think while the individual stories are not ones that we necessarily know, the elements within them we do know. And so I think they've lived up to the classification as classics, insofar as their themes that they were introducing or using relatively early and when they had appeared have survived to this day. I digress, though. This month, our next title is Twilight by author Dawn A. Stuart, who apparently, Dawn Stuart is a pen name for John W. Campbell Jr. And as we do with these, we want to find out a little bit about the author, maybe a little about the story, but we're going to sit down and actually read the story. At least part of it. Depends on how long it is. Anyway, feel free to chime in with commentary or questions if you feel the desire. So under the Dawn Stuart, this is the Internet Speculative Fiction Database, ISFDB. And so it has here a bunch of times that this story has been published. And let's see, Dawn Stuart. Used as alternate name by Arthur J. Burks, John W. Campbell Jr. John Wood Campbell Jr. Is the name that I believe he is best known by. I don't know a ton about him. He doesn't he doesn't jump to mind for me. But that doesn't mean much. Let me see if he's in the science fiction or the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. Here we go. The Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. John W. Campbell Jr. All right, they do have an entry for him. Born 1910, died 1971, U.S. author and editor who took a degree in physics in 1932 from MIT and Duke University, where it is likely he became aware of J.B. Rhine's early experiments in parapsychology. Oh, yay! Campbell was a devotee of the science fiction magazines from their inception and sold his first stories while still a teenager, beginning with Invaders from the Infinite to Amazing Stories. However, the manuscript was lost by editor T. O'Connell Sloan, so it was his second sale, When Atoms Failed, that became his first published story. I would be furious. Also, like, seems like a lesson to take there. If you sell your first story, make sure you have a copy of it to keep for yourself. Because the editor lost his manuscript. If he'd had a copy, he could have replaced the lost one and still gotten it published. But wow. Hi, Papa Glum. It's good to see you. Enjoy the work lurk. An inferior... so, When Atoms Failed. An inferior novel? Okay, Science Fiction Encyclopedia, or the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, is essentially like a wiki. It's editable. It has its own set of rules as to how things are, but it definitely makes judgments. The way things are written, they are biased. And the authors of the articles make judgments or use judgmental terms, so they're not neutral. An inferior novel, drafted circa 1928, was written at Campbell's request by Clifford D. Simak in 1939 or 1940, and it eventually appeared as Empire, powerful novel of intrigue and action in the not-so-distant future. As by Simak alone, Campbell having refused both to be co-credited or to share the receipts, and yet, in the article about him in the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, he's attached to that apparently inferior novel that he wanted nothing to do with. In the early 30s, Campbell quickly built a reputation as E. Doc Smith's chief rival in writing galactic epics of super science. E. Smith, I believe we have at least one story by that author that we'll be getting to, or that we already did? No. Why do I know that name then? It's not on the list. I don't know. Apparently, I should know the name because he was prominent, but the most popular of these was Arco, Mori, and Wade series, in which the heroes faced a succession of battles of ever-increasing size, fought with a succession of wonderful weapons of ever-decreasing likelihood. I mean, that sounds like space opera. Initially published in various magazines from 1930, they were put into book form as The Black Star Passes, Islands of Space, and Invaders from the Infinite. All were assembled as a John W. Campbell anthology. Also well received was The Mightiest Machine, but 3 sequels featuring its hero, Arne Monroe, were rejected by Astounding's editor F. Orland Tremaine, eventually appearing in The Incredible Planet. The second phase of Campbell's career as a writer began with Twilight, November 1934, Astounding, the story that we're going to be looking at today. Hi, Bast Insider. what would you use to make a copy of a manuscript during that time? 1930s copy technology. I mean, aside from just writing out a copy of it, I think that you could do carbons. But carbons at that time, you would have had a piece of paper, a piece of carbon paper, a piece of paper, and written it so that you would have a copy of it. It's a good question. I'm going to look. 1930s, the birth of xerography. American Printing History Association. Ooh, we'll go to Britannica and see what they say. Xerography, which is what the company Xerox was named after. Relies on a photoconductive substance, electrical resistance. Okay, the process was invented in the 1930s. I don't know when. So 1934, who knows? But also, if it was just being invented, it probably wasn't in frequent usage or readily accessible to a teenager. I think it'd be a mimeograph. That was what I was thinking. But origins, stencils, pyrograph, electric pen, cyclostyle. It's interesting, they still have not said when. Okay. It doesn't have a date. It doesn't have a date. Mimeographs, along with spirit duplicators and hectographs, were common technologies for printing small quantities of a document, as in office work, classroom materials, and church bulletins. For even smaller quantities, up to about 5, a typist would use carbon paper. So, carbon paper. Early fanzines were printed by mimeograph because the machines and supplies were widely available and inexpensive. Beginning in the 60s and continuing in the 70s, that's too late for what we're looking at. The pyrograph was commercialized in 1895. Electric pen. Autographic printing. Patent covered the electric pen, used for marking the stencil, flatbed duplicating press. Further patent, method of preparing autographic stencils for printing, which covered the making of stencils using a file plate. Okay, that's a patent, not commercial application. Cyclostyle. In 1891, David Gestetner patented his automatic cyclostyle, one of the first rotary machines that retained the flatbed, which passed back and forth under inked rollers. This invention provided more automated, faster reproductions since the pages were produced and moved by rollers instead of pressing one single sheet at a time. By 1900, 2 primary types of mimeograph had come into use: a single drum machine and a dual drum machine. The single drum machine used a single drum for ink transfer to the stencil, and the dual drum machine used... So it sounds like mimeograph would have been available. Honestly, though, for a teenager's first manuscript, my guess is you'd make a copy by using carbon paper and just typing. Like, even if you hand wrote it, like handwrote the original manuscript, giving it to someone, you would want to make a copy first. And so doing so, probably the easiest and best way would be to get a typewriter and type up what you had handwritten. And then you would have a second copy. And if you wanted, you could actually do carbon paper and make up to 5 copies on that typewriter with carbon paper. But don't have the purple ink. This is true. Anywho, the story we're going to look at today is Twilight, which apparently began the second phase of Campbell's career as a writer. A tale of the far future written in a moody, poetic style. The first of a number of stories, far more literary in tone and varied in mood, published under the pseudonym Don A. Stuart. From now on, Campbell wrote little science fiction under his own name, preferring to concentrate on the highly popular Stuart stories. Exceptions included the Penton and Blake series, published in Thrilling Wonder Stories from December 36 to October 38, and collected in the Planeteers. And on one occasion, the use of the name Carl Van Kampen for a story in an issue of Astounding that already contained a Stuart story and part of a Campbell novel. That was a common thing. You'd get the same author and they'd have multiple things in an issue, but their name could only appear once, so they published under multiple names. Okay. I don't seem to know, like, any of his stories. None of these titles mean anything to me. Apparently, though, by 1939, he had discovered Isaac Asimov, Lester Del Rey, Robert A. Heinlein, Theodore Sturgeon, and A.E. Van Vogt. L. Sprague de Camp, L. Ron Hubbard, Murray Leinster, Clifford D. Simak, and Jack Williamson, already established science fiction writers, also then became part of his stable. Essentially, he worked as an editor for their work. Interesting. Harry Kuttner and C.L. Moore became regular contributors from 1942 and were the core of his golden age of science fiction, a period corresponding roughly to World War II, when Astounding, the magazine that we're looking at, dominated the genre. Interesting. Okay. There's more in that article, but I'm not gonna. Ooh, you might have to rewatch Far Beyond the Stars. Is that... Did it mention it? I don't remember seeing that, but I could have glossed right over it. Oh, Far Beyond the Stars. You mean the Star Trek episode? Which, Heinlein. Oh, right. I'm trying to place which one it is. Is it the time travel one where they go back to... I don't remember. No, oh gosh. No, Far Beyond the Stars is the one where Sisko is an author writing for science fiction magazines. Yeah, set in a sci-fi magazine office of that period. Yes. Thank you, Key Squared. It took me a minute to get there, but I got there without even looking it up. Okay. There is an entry for the story in the Internet Time Travel Database. This article might give us some spoilers, but I'm honestly not that worried about it. In 1932, James Waters Bendel picks up a magnificently sculpted hitchhiker named Aries Sen Kenlon. The Sen means he's a scientist, but Waters is just a name. who says that he's trying to get back to his home time, 3059, after being pulled into a far distant future where mankind has atrophied because of their reliance on machines. Jeff Delgado. Okay. We will definitely... I already see, just from that little brief description, I already see some themes. There's a whole Wikipedia article, though, on this story. Sterling? What do you mean you didn't pick this? It's about vampires. No, it's not. It's not glitter vampires, I swear. Twilight is a science fiction short story by John Campbell. Also, how is your new Diggs, your new internship that isn't here with me? I hope you're having a good time, and that the Shenandoah Valley is treating you well. Apparently inspired by H.G. Wells's article "The Man of the Year Million." It was in 1970. It was selected as one of the best science fiction short stories published before the creation of the Nebula Awards by the Science Fiction Writers of America. As such, it was published in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 1. So already we haven't read it yet, and it seems like 7 years after it was written, it being called a classic, not out of the realm of reasonability. I am very interested to find out what it is, Sterling. Set in 1932 in an unnamed small town in Nevada. I'm not going to read the description. Let's see. He developed while he was living in North Carolina. He had become more focused on tone. Okay, so he had gotten a story rejected, and then he became more focused in tone after reading a novel by Charles Albert Scoggins. And essentially, it launched a new phase of his career. Campbell scholar Alec Navala-Lee wrote that the result was, quote, like nothing else Campbell had ever written, save for the opening to the Black Star Passes. But Navala-Lee emphasizes the crucial difference that the opening of the Black Star Passes describes aliens, while Twilight is about humans. Interesting. He worked on it longer than he usually did, was repeatedly turned down by publishers. F. Orland Tremaine published it in Astounding, where we're going to read it. No sparkly vampires today, sorry. Tremaine enjoyed the short story, but thought it might confuse readers if published alongside The Mightiest Machine. The latter story was significantly less unique for Campbell, and so Tremaine and Campbell settled on publishing it under the pseudonym Don A. Stuart. Stories published as Stuart would quickly become popular among readers. We're going to skip the plot summary because we're going to read it. Author Isaac Asimov, as a fan of Astounding before he was a writer, disliked Twilight and wrote to the editor criticizing it. Interesting. Especially given that the article we were just looking at says that Campbell discovered Asimov as a writer. So Aldous Budrus said of Twilight that it attracted a decade-long series of engineers/mystics as the archetypal writers of the Golden Age and brought about the late Victorian Edwardian flavor of modern science fiction. Everett Blyler concluded that Twilight conveys a mood. It is probably Campbell's best story, with many implications beyond the story level. All right, I think it's time that we actually look at it. I'm actually really interested to see what it is now that we've had that introduction. Okay, so we have here the November 1934 issue of Astounding Stories. And you can see the cover story here is The Mole Pirate by Murray Leinster, which is next month's story. That we won't be reading that one today, but next month, The Mole Pirate. Actually, might not be till July, because I don't think we're getting a story next month, because whatever. We'll talk about schedule later. All right. And for all you curious about archival practices, yes, those were post-it notes. No, they were not stuck to the document. I didn't put them in there, but what was done was in no way wrong for the brief time that it was being used as a bookmark for a very brief time. And while it is post-it notes, they were stuck together with the sticky part sticking up out of the book. So not ideal, but also not super terrible. Okay. We'll have fun with weights. Twilight, a story that will set you to dreaming of purple distances, of a far future world wherein a race is dying 7 million years away. 7 million years! By Dawn A. Stuart. The illustration here, I might zoom in on the illustration just so you can see. Then I saw the city of perfect machines, illustrated by Elliot Dold. I don't know, Key Squared, if the prose will be as purple as the distances. The city of perfect machines. And it's interesting, I can't really tell. Oh, there's some scale for us. There's a human. How the human got there to the top of that tower, when that tower doesn't seem like it's tall, but not much wider than a human. I don't know what those towers are for, but it's 7 million years in the future, so who knows? Right? Who am I? How? What? I can't really judge the architecture of a culture 7 million years hence. Iron Giant meme. It's art! I don't actually know that meme. I'm gonna have to learn the Iron Giant meme now. Twilight by Dawn A. Stewart. Speaking of hitchhikers, said Jim Bendel, in a rather bewildered way, I picked up a man the other day that certainly was a queer cuss. He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. He told me the queerest yarn I ever heard. Most of them tell you how they lost their good jobs and tried to find work out here in the wide spaces of the West. They don't seem to realize how many people we have out here. They think all this great, beautiful country is uninhabited. It shouldn't need explanation, it's art. That makes sense. And I will note, historical terms, the use of the word queer here is in the 1930s context, which basically means strange, and doesn't have the same connotations as when we use it today. Right. Jim Bendel's a real estate man, and I knew how he could go on. That's his favorite line, you know. He's real worried because there's a lot of homesteading plots still open out in our state. He talks about the beautiful country, but he never went farther into the desert than the edge of town. Right of it, actually. So I sort of steered him back on the track. What did he claim, Jim? Prospector who couldn't find land to prospect? That's not very funny, Bart. No, it wasn't only what he claimed. He didn't even claim it, just said it. You know, he didn't say it was true. He just said it. That's what gets me. Darn it, I know it ain't true. But the way he said it, oh, I don't know. By which I knew he didn't. Jim Bendel's usually pretty careful about his English. Real proud of it. When he slips, that means he's disturbed. Like the time he thought the rattlesnake was a stick of wood and wanted to put it on the fire. Jim went on. And he had funny clothes, too. They looked like silver, but they were soft as silk. And at night they glowed just a little. I picked him up about dusk. Really picked him up. He was lying off about 10 feet from the south road. I thought at first somebody had hit him, and then hadn't stopped. Didn't see him very clearly, you know. I picked him up, put him in the car, and started on. I had about 300 miles to go, but I thought I could drop him at Warren Spring with Doc Vance. But he came to in about 5 minutes and opened his eyes. He looked up straight off, and he looked first at the car, then at the moon. Thank God, he says, and then he looks at me. It gave me a shock. He was beautiful. No, he was handsome. He wasn't either one. He was magnificent. He was about 6'2", I think, and his hair was brown, with a touch of red gold. It seemed like fine copper wire that's turned brown. It was crisp and curly. His forehead was wide, twice as wide as mine. His features were delicate, but tremendously impressive. His eyes were gray, like etched iron, and bigger than mine. A lot. That suit he wore. It was more like a bathing suit, with pajama trousers. His arms were long and muscled, smoothly, as a Native American's. He was white, though, tanned lightly with a golden rather than a brown tan. But he was magnificent. Most wonderful man I ever saw. I don't know, darn it. Hello, I said. Have an accident? No, not this time at least. And his voice was magnificent too. It wasn't an ordinary voice. It sounded like an organ talking. Only it was human. But maybe my mind isn't quite steady yet. I tried an experiment. Tell me what the date is, year and all, and let me see, he went on. Why, December 9th, 1932, I said. And it didn't please him. He didn't like it a bit. But the wry grin that came over his face gave way to a chuckle. Oh no, he knows Celestial. Oh. There it is. Okay, I lost it. Over 1,000, he says reminiscently. Not as bad as 7 million. I shouldn't complain. 7 million what? Years, he said steadily enough, like he meant it. I tried an experiment once. Oh, wait, years, he said steadily enough, like he meant it. I tried an experiment once, or I will try it. Now I'll have to try it again. The experiment was in 3059. I'd just finished the release experiment, testing space then. Time, it wasn't that, I still believe. It was space. I felt myself caught in that field, but I couldn't pull away. Field Gamma H481, intensity 935, in the Pellman range. It sucked men in, and I went out. I think it took a shortcut through space to the position the solar system will occupy. Through a higher dimension, affecting a speed exceeding light and throwing me into the future plane. He wasn't telling me, He was just thinking out loud. And then he began to realize I was there. I couldn't read their instruments. 7 million years of evolution changed everything, so I overshot my mark a little coming back. I belong in 3059. I don't quite understand how the year 3059 is 7 million years in the future, but I assume that at some point they restarted numbering. But tell me, what's the latest scientific invention of this year? He startled me so, I answered almost before I thought. Why, television, I guess, and radio and airplanes. Radio. Good. They will have instruments. But see here, who are you? Ah, I'm sorry. I forgot, he replied in that organ-like voice of his. I am Aries Sen Kenlon. And you? James Waters Bendel. Waters? What does that mean? I do not recognize it. I see. You've not had... Wait. Sorry, I got lost. Why, it's a name, of course. Why should you recognize it? I see. You have not... The classification, then. Sen stands for science. Where did you come from, Mr. Canlon? Come from? He smiled, and his voice was slow and soft. I came out of space across 7 million years or more. They had lost count, the men had. The machines had eliminated the unneeded service. They didn't know what year it was. But before that, my home is in the Nevath city in the year 3059. That's when I began to think he was a nut. I was an experimenter, he went on. Science, as I have said. My father was a scientist too, but in human genetics. I myself am an experiment. He proved his point, and all the world followed suit. I was the first of the new race. The new race? Oh, holy destiny. What will... Oh, wait. Sorry, it's me. I'm struggling with knowing which speaker is speaking. I need to actually pay attention to the cues. It's punctuated correctly to tell me. Anyway. Began to think. Began to think he was a nut? Apparently. I was the first of a new race. The new race. Oh, holy destiny. What will? What is its end? I have seen it. Almost. I saw them. The little men. Bewildered. Lost. And machines. Must it be? Can't anything sway it? Listen, I heard this song. He sang the song. Then he didn't have to tell me about the people. I knew them. I could hear their voices. In the queer, crackling, un-English words, I could read their bewildered longings. It was in a minor key, I think. It called and asked, and hunted hopelessly. And over it all, the steady rumble and whine of the unknown, forgotten machines. The machines that couldn't stop, because they had been started, and the little men who had forgotten how to stop them, or even what they were for, looking at them and listening, wondering. They couldn't read or write anymore. And the language had changed, you see, so the phonic records of their ancestors meant nothing to them. But that song went on, and they wondered. And they looked out across space, and they saw the warm, friendly stars too far away. 9 planets they knew and inhabited. And locked by infinite distance, they couldn't see another race, a new life. And through it all, 2 things. The machines, bewildered forgetfulness, and maybe one more. Why? That was the song, and it made me cold. It shouldn't be sung around people of today. It almost killed something. It seemed to kill hope. After that song, I believed him. When he finished the song, he didn't talk for a while. Then he sort of shook himself. You won't understand, he continued. Not yet. But I have seen them. They stand about. Little misshapen. Oh, see, now it's mixing things. Because this, the way it's punctuated, I've lost their names. Waters. James Waters Bendel. So at the moment, it's James Waters Bendel speaking, quoting the guy from the future, Mr. Kenlon. So technically I should use whatever accent I gave to Bendel. But really, I should do Bendel's best interpretation of Kenlon. My accents are gonna get all confused. But anyway. You won't understand, he continued. Not yet, but I have seen them. They stand about, little misshapen men with huge heads, but their heads contain only brains. They had machines that could think. But somebody turned them off a long time ago, and no one knew how to start them again. That was the trouble with them. They had wonderful brains, far better than yours or mine. But it must have been millions of years ago, when they were turned off, too, and they just hadn't thought since... Wait, and they... Out there. And they just hadn't thought since then. Kind little people. That was all they knew. When I slipped into that field, it grabbed me like a gravitational field, whirling a space transport down to a planet. It sucked me in and through. Only the other side must have been 7 million years in the future. That's where I was. It must have been in exactly the same spot on Earth's surface, but I never knew why. It was night then, and I saw the city a little way off. The moon was shining on it, and the whole scene looked wrong. You see, in 7 million years, men had done a lot with the positions of the planetary bodies. What with moving space liners, clearing lanes through the asteroids and such. And 7 million years is long enough for natural things to change positions a little. The moon must have been 50,000 miles farther out. And it was rotating on its axis. I lay there a while and watched it. Even the stars were different. There were ships going out of the city, back and forth, like things sliding along a wire. There was only a wire of force, of course. Part of the city, the lower part, was brightly lighted with what must have been mercury vapor glow, I decided. Blue-green. I felt sure men didn't live there. The light was wrong for eyes, but the top of the city was so sparsely lighted. Then I saw something coming down out of the sky. It was brightly lighted, a huge globe, and it sank straight to the center of the great black and silver mass of the city. I don't know what it was, but even then, I knew the city was deserted. Strange that I could even imagine that. I who had never seen a deserted city before. But I walked 15 miles over to it and entered it. There were machines going about the streets, repair machines, you know. They couldn't understand that the city didn't need the city didn't need to go on functioning, so they were still working. I found a taxi machine that seemed fairly familiar. It had a manual control that I could work. I don't know how long that city had been deserted. Some of the men from other cities said it was 150,000 years. Some went as high as 300,000 years. 300,000 years since human foot had been in that city. The taxi machine was in perfect condition, functioned at once. It was clean, and the city was clean and orderly. I saw a restaurant, and I was hungry. Hungrier still for humans to speak to. There were none, of course, but I didn't know. The restaurant had the food displayed directly, and I made a choice. The food was 300,000 years old, I suppose. I didn't know, and the machines that served it to me didn't care, for they made things synthetically, you see, and perfectly. When they made those cities, they forgot one thing. They didn't realize that things shouldn't go on forever. It took me 6 months to make my apparatus, and near the end, I was ready to go, and from seeing those machines go blindly, perfectly on in orbits of their duties with the tireless, ceaseless perfection of their designers had incorporated in them long after those designers and their sons' sons had no use for them. When Earth is cold and the sun has died out, those machines will go on. When Earth begins to crack and break, those perfect, ceaseless machines will try to repair her. I left the restaurant and cruised about the city in a taxi. The machine had a little electric power motor, I believe, but it gained its power from the great central power radiator. I knew before long that I was far in the future. The city was divided into 2 sections. A section of many strata, where machines functioned smoothly, save for a deep humming beat that echoed through the whole city like a vast, unending song of power. The entire metal framework of the place echoed with it, transmitted it, hummed with it. But it was soft and restful, a reassuring beat. There must have been 30 levels above ground and 20 more below. A solid block of metal walls and metal floors and metal and glass and force machines. The only light was the blue-green glow of the mercury vapor arcs. The light of mercury vapor is rich in high-energy quanta, which affects the alkali metal atoms readily to photoelectric activity. Or perhaps that is beyond the science of your day. I have forgotten. But they had used that light because many of their worker machines needed sight. They were marvelous. For 5 hours I wandered through the vast power plant on the very lowest level, watching them. And because there was motion and that pseudo-mechanical life, I felt less alone. The generators I saw were development of the release I had discovered. When? The release of the energy of matter, I mean, and I knew when I saw that for what countless ages they could continue. The entire lower block of the city was given over to the machines, thousands. But most of them seemed idle, or at most running under light load. I recognized a telephone apparatus, and not a single signal came through. There was no life in the city. Yet when I pressed a little stud beside the screen on one side of the room, the machine began working instantly. It was ready. Only no one needed it anymore. The men knew how to die and be dead, but the machines didn't. Finally, I went up to the top of the city, the upper level. It was a paradise. There were shrubs and trees and parks glowing in the soft light that they had learned to make in the very air. They had learned it 5 million years or more before. 2 million years ago they forgot. But the machines didn't, and they were still making it. It hung in the air, soft, silvery light, slightly rosy, and the gardens were shadowy with it. There were no machines here now. But I knew that in daylight they must come out and work on these gardens, keeping them paradise for masters who had died and stopped moving as they could not. In the desert outside the city, it had been cool and very dry. Here, the air was soft, warm, and sweet, with a scent of blooms that men had spent several hundreds of thousands of years perfecting. Then somewhere music began. It began in the air and spread softly through it. The moon was just setting now, and as it set, the rosy silver glow waned and the music grew stronger. It came from everywhere and from nowhere. It was within me. I do not know how they did it, and I do not know how such music could be written. Savages make music too simple to be beautiful, but it is stirring. Semi-savages write music beautifully simple and simply beautiful. Sorry, historical terms I'm trying to translate to modern English. Your African American music was your best. They knew music when they heard it and sang it as they felt it. Semi-civilized peoples write great music. They are proud of their music and make sure it is known for great music. They make it so great, it is top-heavy. I had always thought our music good, but that which came through the air was the song of triumph, sung by a mature race, the race of man in its full triumph. It was man singing his triumph in majestic sound that swept me up. It showed me what lay before me. It carried me on. And it died in the air as I looked at the deserted city. The machines should have forgotten that song. Their masters had long before. I came to what must have been one of their homes. It was a dimly seen doorway in the dusky light, but as I stepped up to it, the lights, which had not functioned in 300,000 years, illuminated it for me with a green-white glow, like a firefly, and I stepped into the room beyond. Instantly, something happened to the air in the doorway behind me. It was as opaque as milk. The room in which I stood was a room of metal and stone. The stone was some jet-black substance, with the finish of velvet, and the metals were silver and gold. There was a rug on the floor, a rug of just such material as I am wearing now, but thicker and softer. There were divans about the room, low and covered with these soft metallic materials. They were black and gold and silver too. I had never seen anything like that. I never shall again, I suppose. And my language and yours were not made to describe it. Okay. We're going to take a short break for a couple of minutes while the Twitch system plays advertisements that I cannot make go away completely. So I will be back in like 3 minutes or so. Okay, we should be back. And for anyone who joined us during the break, welcome to Archival Adventures. We are reading a story from 1934, the title of which is Twilight, and it is not about sparkly vampires. It is December of 1932, and a man from 3059 is describing what he saw 7 million years in the future to someone from 1932. So a little convoluted, but so far pretty interesting. Let's see. The builders of that city had right and reason to sing that song of sweeping triumph, triumph that swept them over the 9 planets and the 15 habitable moons. But they weren't there anymore, and I wanted to leave. I thought of a plan and went to a sub-telephone office to examine a map I had seen. The old world looked much the same. 7 or even 70 million years doesn't mean much to old Mother Earth. She may even succeed in wearing down those marvelous machine cities. She can wait 100 million or 1,000 million years or even 100,000 million years before she is beaten. I tried calling different city centers, shown on the map. I had quickly learned the system when I examined the central apparatus. I tried once, twice, thrice, around dozen times. York City, Lunan City, Paris, Chicago, Singapore, others. I was beginning to feel that there were no more men on all Earth. Okay, I know what Paris, Chicago, and Singapore are. What's... Oh, York City would be New York. London would be London. So York City, London City, Paris, Chicago, and Singapore. I like that evolution of the city names over time. I was beginning to feel that there were no more men on all Earth, and I felt crushed, as at each city the machines replied and did my bidding. The machines were there in each of those far vaster cities, for I was in the Neva city of their time. Neva city, it's Nevada. That's all I know. I'm guessing it's probably Las Vegas, but a small city. York City is more than 50 kilometers in diameter. In each city, I had tried several numbers. Then I tried San Francisco. There was someone there, and a voice answered, and the picture of a human appeared on the little glowing screen. I could see him start and stare in surprise at me. Then he started speaking to me. I couldn't understand, of course. I can understand your speech, and you mine, because your speech at this day is largely recorded on records of various types, and has influenced our pronunciation. Some things are changed, Names of cities particularly, because names of cities are apt to be polysyllabic and used a great deal. People tend to elide them, shorten them. I am in Nevada, as you would say. We say only Neva. And York State? But it is Ohio and Iowa still. Over 1,000 years, effects were small on words because they were recorded. But 7 million years had passed, and the men had forgotten the old records, used them less as time went on, and their speech varied till the time came when they could no longer understand the records. They were not written any more, of course. Some men must have arisen occasionally among that last of the race and sought for knowledge, but it was denied them. An ancient writing can be translated if some basic rule is found. An ancient voice, though? And when the race has forgotten the laws of science and the labor of mind? So his speech was strange to me as he answered over the circuit. His voice was high in pitch, its words liquid, the tones sweet. It was almost a song as he spoke. He was excited and called others. I could not understand them, but I knew where they were. I could go to them. So I went down from the paradise of gardens, and as I prepared to leave, I saw dawn in the sky. The strange bright stars winked and twinkled and faded. Only one bright rising star was familiar, Venus. She shone golden now. Finally, I stood watching for the first time that strange heaven. I began to understand what had first impressed me with the wrongness of the view. The stars, you see, were all different. In my time and yours, the solar system is a lone wanderer that by chance is passing across an intersection point of galactic traffic. The stars we see at night are the stars of moving clusters, you know. In fact, our system is passing through the heart of the Ursa Major group. Half a dozen other groups center within 500 light years of us. But during those 7 millions of years, the sun had moved out of the group. The heavens were almost empty to the eye. Only here and there shone a single faint star, and across the vast sweep of black sky swung the band of the Milky Way. The sky was empty. There must have been another thing those men meant in their songs, felt in their hearts. Loneliness. Not even the close, friendly stars. We have stars within a half dozen light years. They told me that their instruments, which gave directly the distance to any star, showed that the nearest was 150 light years away. It was enormously bright, brighter even than Sirius of our heavens, and that made it even less friendly because it was a blue-white supergiant. Our sun would have served as a satellite for that star. I stood there and watched the lingering rose-silver glow die as the powerful blood-red light of the sun swept over the horizon. I knew by the stars now that it must have been several millions of years since my day, since I had last seen the sun sweep up. And that blood-red light made me wonder if the sun itself was dying. An edge of it appeared, blood-red and huge. It swung up and the color faded, till in half an hour it was the familiar yellow-gold disk. It hadn't changed in all that time. I had been foolish to think that it would. 7 million years, that is nothing to Earth. How much less to the sun? Some 8,000 times it had risen since I last saw it rise. 8,000 days, or 8,000 days. If it had been that many years, I might have noticed a change. The universe moves slowly. Only life is not enduring. Only life changes swiftly. 8 short millions of years. 8 days in the life of Earth, and the race was dying. It had left something. Machines. but they would die too, even though they could not understand. So I felt. I may have changed that. Now, I will tell you later. For when the sun was up, I looked again at the sky and the ground, some 50 floors below. I had come to the edge of the city. Machines were moving on that ground, leveling it perhaps. A great wide line of gray stretched off across the level desert, straight to the east. I had seen it glowing faintly before the sun rose. A roadway for ground machines. There was no traffic on it. I saw an airship slip in from the east. It came with a soft muttering whine of air, like a child complaining in sleep. It grew to my eyes like an expanding balloon. It was huge when it settled in the great port slip of the city below. I could hear now the clang and mutter of machines, working on the materials brought in, no doubt. The machines had ordered raw materials. The machines in other cities had supplied. The freight machines had carried them here. San Francisco and Jacksonville were the only two cities on North America still used, but the machines went on in all the others because they couldn't stop. They hadn't been ordered to. Then, high above, something appeared, and from the city beneath me, from a center section, 3 small spheres rose. They, like the freight ship, had no visible driving mechanisms. The point in the sky above, like a black star in a blue space, had grown to a moon. The 3 spheres met it high above. Then together they descended and lowered into the center of the city, where I could not see them. It was a freight transport from Venus. The one I had seen land the night before had come from Mars, I learned. I moved after that and looked for some sort of taxi plane. They had none that I recognized in scouting about the city. I searched the higher levels and here and there saw deserted ships, but far too large for me and without controls. It was nearly noon and I ate again. The food was good. I knew then that this was a city of the dead ashes of human hopes, the hopes of not a race, not the whites, nor, oh dear, historical terms again. Not the Europeans or the Asians or the Africans, but the human race. I was mad to leave it. I was afraid to try the ground road to the west. For the taxi I drove was powered from some source in the city, and I knew it would fail before many miles. It was afternoon when I found a small hangar near the outer wall of the vast city. It contained 3 ships. I had been searching through the lower strata of the human section, the upper part. There were restaurants, shops, and theaters there. I entered one place where, at my entrance, soft music began and colors and forms began to rise on a screen before me. They were the triumph songs in form and sound and color of a mature race. A race that had marched steadily upward through 5 millions of years and didn't see the path that faded out ahead when they were dead and had stopped and the city itself was dead, but it hadn't stopped. I hastened out of there, and the song that had not been sung in 300,000 years died behind me. But I found the hangar. It was a private one, likely. 3 ships. One must have been 50 feet long and 15 in diameter. It was a yacht. A space yacht, probably. One was, oh, sorry. One was some 15 feet long and 5 feet in diameter. That must have been the family air machine. The third was a tiny thing, little more than 10 feet long and 2 in diameter. I had to lie down within it, evidently. There was a periscope device that gave me a view ahead and almost directly above. A window that permitted me to see what lay below, and a device that moved a map under a frosted glass screen and projected it onto the screen in such a way that the crosshairs of the screen always marked my position. I spent half an hour attempting to understand what the makers of that ship had made. But the men who made that were men who held behind them the science and knowledge of 5 millions of years, and the perfect machines of those ages. I saw the release mechanism that powered it. I understood the principles of that and vaguely its mechanics. But there were no conductors, only pale beams that pulsed so swiftly you could hardly catch the pulsations from the corner of the eye. They had been glowing and pulsating steadily, some half dozen of them, for 300,000 years at least, probably more. I entered the machine, and instantly half a dozen more beams sprang into being, and there was a slight suggestion of a quiver, and a queer strain ran through my body. I understood in an instant, for the machine was resting on gravity nullifiers. That had been my hope when I worked on the space fields I discovered after the release. But they had it for millions of years before they built that perfect, deathless machine. My weight entering it had forced it to readjust itself, and simultaneously to prepare for operation. Within, an artificial gravity equal to Earth's had gripped me, and the neutral zone between the outside and the interior had caused the strain. The machine was ready. I was fully fueled too. You see, they were equipped to tell automatically their wants and needs. They were almost living things, every one. A caretaker machine kept them supplied, adjusted, even repaired them when need be and when possible. If it was not, I learned later, they were carried away in a service truck that came automatically, replaced by an exactly similar machine, and carried to the shops where they were made, and automatic machines made them over. The machine waited patiently for me to start. The controls were simple, obvious. There was a lever at the left that you pushed forward to move forward, pulled back to go back. On the right, a horizontal pivoted bar. If you swung it left, the ship spun left. If right, the ship spun right. If tipped up, the ship followed it, and likewise for all motions other than backward and forward. Raising it bodily raised the ship, as depressing it depressed the ship. So basically, it's the same control scheme as a video game controller, except levers instead of driven knobs. But one that moves you forward and backward, one that'll do. I mean, maybe not exactly the same, because usually video games, it's one is forward, backward, left, and right, like, and one is up and down. And in this one, he's got the up and down with the left and right, and the other one doing forward and backward, which honestly seems very confusing to me, but quite interesting. I lifted it slightly. A needle moved a bit on a gauge comfortably before my eye as I lay there, and the floor dropped beneath me. I pulled the other control back, and the ship gathered speed as it moved gently out into the open. Releasing both controls into neutral, the machine continued till it stopped at the same elevation, the motion absorbed by air friction. I turned it about, and another dial before my eyes moved, showing my position. I could not read it, though. The map did not move, as I had hoped it would. So I started toward what I felt was west. I could feel no acceleration in that marvelous machine. The ground simply began leaping backward, and in a moment the city was gone. The map unrolled rapidly beneath me now, and I saw that I was moving south of west. I turned northward slightly and watched the compass. Soon I understood that, too, and the ship sped on. I had become too interested in the map and the compass, for suddenly there was a sharp buzz, and without my volition, the machine rose and swung to the north. There was a mountain ahead of me I had not seen, but the ship had. I noticed then what I should have seen before, 2 little knobs that would move the map. I started to move them and heard a sharp clicking, and the pace of the ship began decreasing. A moment, and it had steadied at a considerably lower speed, the machine swinging to a new course. I tried to right it, but to my amazement, the controls did not affect it. It was the map, you see. It would either follow the course, or the course would follow it. I had moved it, and the machine had taken over control of its own accord. There was a little button I could have pushed, but I didn't know. I couldn't control the ship until it finally came to rest and lowered itself to a stop 6 inches from the ground, in the center of what must have been the ruins of a great city. Sacramento, probably. I understood now, so I adjusted the map for San Francisco, and the ship went on at once. It steered itself around a mass of broken stone, turned back to its course, and headed on, a bullet-shaped, self-controlled dart. It didn't descend when it reached San Francisco. It simply hung in the air and sounded a soft musical hum. Twice. Then it waited. I waited too, and looked down. There were people here. I saw the humans of that age for the first time. They were graceful, tall, slim people, with heads disproportionately large, but not extremely so. Their eyes impressed me most. They were huge, and when they looked at me, there was a power in them that seemed sleeping, but too deeply to be roused. I took the manual controls then and landed, and no sooner had I got out than the ship rose automatically and started off by itself. They had automatic parking devices. The ship had gone to a public hangar, the nearest, where it would be automatically serviced and cared for. There was a little call set I should have taken with me when I got out. Then I could have pressed a button and called it to me, wherever I was in that city. uh, the people about me began talking, singing almost, among themselves. Others were coming up leisurely. Men and women. But there seemed no old and few young. What few young there were treated almost with respect, carefully taken care of, lest a careless footstep on their toes or a careless step knock them down. There was reason, you see. They lived a tremendous time. Some lived as long as 3,000 years. Then they simply died. They didn't grow old, and it never had been learned why people died as they did. The heart stopped, the brain ceased thought, and they died. But the young children not yet mature, were treated with the utmost care. But one child was born in the course of a month in that city of 100,000 people. The human race was growing sterile. And I have told you that they were lonely. Their loneliness was beyond hope. For you see, as man strode toward maturity, he destroyed all forms of life that menaced him. Disease, insects, then the last of the insects, and finally the last of the man-eating animals. The balance of nature was destroyed then, so they had to go on. It was like the machines. They started them, and now they can't stop. They started destroying life, and now it wouldn't stop. So they had to destroy weeds of all sorts, then many formerly harmless plants, then the herbivora, too, the deer and the antelope and the rabbit and the horse. They were a menace. They attacked man's machine-tended crops. Man was still eating natural foods. You can understand, the thing was beyond their control. In the end, they killed off the denizens of the sea also in self-defense. Without the many creatures that had kept them in check, they were swarming beyond bounds, and the time had come when synthetic foods replaced natural. The air was purified of all life about 2.5 million years after our day, all microscopic life. That meant that the water must be. It was, and then came the end of life in the ocean. There were minute organisms that lived on bacterial forms, and tiny fish that lived on the minute organisms, and small fish that lived on the tiny fish, and big fish that lived on the small fish, and the beginning of the chain was gone. The sea was devoid of life in a generation. That meant about 1,500 years to them. Even the sea plants had gone. And on all Earth there was only man, and the organisms he had protected, the plants he wanted for decoration, and certain ultra-hygienic pets, as long-lived as their masters. Dogs. They must have been remarkable animals. Man was reaching his maturity then, and his animal friend, the friend that had followed him through 1,000 millenniums to your day and mine, and another 4,000 millenniums. Oh, we have a raid from 16-bit Eric. Welcome in, Whimsies. It is good to see you. I hope that Breath of the Wild was good, and that you're all having a good Wednesday or Whimsday, as the case may be. If anybody is here who does not already follow 16-bit Eric, I would encourage you to do so, because Eric is a wonderful streamer, and the Whimsies are a great community. Shadows of Life, thank you for the bit. Welcome in, everybody. I am Rogan27, the channel that you rated in on. This is my Archival Adventures stream. It streams both to my channel as well as to VTUL Studios, which is the Virginia Tech University Libraries channel. I am the Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech, and this is the show where I share random things from the archives, usually things I've not seen before, and it's kind of like an unboxing, and we discover things and learn together. This week we are reading a sci-fi story from a 1934 pulp sci-fi magazine. This is the 9th in a list of stories that in 1940 the sci-fi critic Sam Moskowitz called classic, even though they were only 7, 6, and 5 years old. And the story that we're looking at today is Twilight by Don Stuart, better known as John W. Campbell Jr. So we have been learning about life on Earth 7 million years in the future, as related to a citizen of Nevada in December of 1932 by a time traveler from 3059. Who apparently has a very light and musical voice, which, anyway. Wizards and Beans, thank you for the follow. Okay, let's see. Where was I? Man had killed off everything except dogs and some decorative houseplants. Okay, and on all Earth, there was only man and the organisms he had protected, the plants he wanted for decoration, and certain ultra-hygienic pets, as long-lived as their masters. Dogs. They must have been remarkable animals. Man was reaching his maturity then, and his animal friend, the friend that had followed him through 1,000 millenniums to your day and mine, and another 4,000 millenniums to the day of man's early maturity, had grown in intelligence. In an ancient museum, a wonderful place, for they had perfectly preserved the body of a great leader of mankind who had died 5.5 million years before I saw him. In that museum, deserted then, I saw one of those canines. His skull was nearly as large as mine. They had simple ground machines that dogs could be trained to drive, and they held races in which the dogs drove those machines. Then, man reached his full maturity. It extended over a period of a full 1,000,000 years. So tremendously did he stride ahead, the dogs ceased to be a companion. Less and less were they wanted. When the 1,000,000 years had passed and man's decline began, the dog was gone. It had died out. And now this last dwindling group of men still in the system had no other life form to make his successor. Always before, when one civilization toppled, on its ashes rose a new one. Now, there was but one civilization, and all other races, even other species, were gone, save in the plants. And man was too far along in his old age to bring intelligence and mobility from the plants. Perhaps he could have in his prime. Other worlds were flooded with man during that 1,000,000 years. The 1,000,000 years. Every plant and every moon of the system had its quota of men. Now only the planets had their populations. The moons had been deserted. Pluto had been left before I landed, and men were coming from Neptune, moving in toward the sun and the home planet while I was there. Strangely quiet men, viewing, most of them for the first time, the planet that had given their race life. But as I stepped from that ship and watched it rise away from me, I saw why the race of man was dying. I looked back at the faces of those men, and on them I read the answer. There was one single quality gone from the still great minds, minds far greater than yours or mine. I had to have the help of one of them in solving some of my problems. In space, there are 20 coordinates, 10 of which are 0, 6 have fixed values, and the 4 others represent our changing familiar dimensions in spacetime. That means that integrations must proceed, if not double or triple or quadruple, but 10 integrations. That would be decimal. It would have taken me too long. I would never have solved all the problems I must work out. I could not use their mathematics machines, and mine, of course, were 7,000,000 years in the past. But one of those men was interested and helped me. He did quadruple and quintuple integration, even quadruple integration between varying exponential limits in his head. When I asked him to, for the one thing that had made man great had left him. As I looked in their faces and eyes on landing, I knew it. They looked at me, interested at this rather unusual-looking stranger, and went on. They had come to see the arrival of a ship. A rare event, you see, but they were merely welcoming me in a friendly fashion. They were not curious. Man had lost the instinct of curiosity. Oh, not entirely. They wondered at the machines. They wondered at the stars. But they did nothing about it. It was not wholly lost to them, but nearly. It was dying. In the 6 short months I stayed with them, I learned more than they had learned in the 2 or even 3,000 years they had lived among the machines. Can you appreciate the crushing hopelessness it brought to me? I, who love science, who see in it or have seen in it the salvation, the raising of mankind, to see those wondrous machines of man's triumphant maturity forgotten and misunderstood. The wondrous, perfect machines that tended, protected, and cared for those gentle, kindly people who had forgotten. They were lost among it. The city was a magnificent ruin to them, a thing that rose stupendous about them, something not understood, a thing that was of the nature of the world. It was. It had not been made. It simply was, just as the mountains and the deserts and the waters of the seas. Do you understand? Can you see that the time since those machines were new was longer than the time from our day to the birth of the race? Do we know the legends of our first ancestors? Do we remember their lore of forest and cave? The secret of chipping a flint till it had a sharp cutting edge? The secret of trailing and killing a saber-toothed tiger without being killed oneself? They were not in similar straits, though the time had been longer, because the language had taken a long step toward perfection. But because the machines maintained everything for them through generation after generation, why, the entire planet of Pluto had been deserted. Yet on Pluto, the largest mines of one of their metals were located. The machines still functioned. A perfect unity existed throughout the system, a unified system of perfect machines. And all those people knew was that to do a certain thing to a certain lever produced certain results. Just as men in the Middle Ages knew that to take a certain material, wood, and place it in contact with other pieces of wood heated red would cause the wood to disappear and become heat. They did not understand that wood was being oxidized with the release of the heat of formation of carbon dioxide and water. So those people did not understand the things that fed and clothed and carried them. I stayed with them there for 3 days, and then I went to Jacksonville. York City, too. That was enormous. It stretched over, well north of where Boston is today, and well south of Washington. That was what they called York City. I never believed that. I never believed that when he said it, said Jim, interrupting himself. I knew he didn't. If he had, I think he'd have bought land somewhere along there and held for a rise in value. I know Jim. He'd have the idea that 7 million years was something like 700, and maybe his great-grandchildren would be able to sell it. Hi, Concilians! Thank you for the 50-month resubscription. And hi, Pretty Witchery. Asimov made something similar, part of Foundation. The smart people became religious leaders and had people carry out mathematical and scientific tasks by rote or ritual. Yes. And I forgot one other aspect. So this is there is a confusion of narrators in this story, because the story is told from the perspective of someone who Jim is telling the story to. So we are being told the story third hand, because we're being told the story by the narrator, who heard the story from Jim, who heard the story from Arn, or I don't remember what the guy's name is, the guy from 3059. So the guy from 3059 has firsthand knowledge from having traveled 7 million years in the future and had to figure out how to get back, but he overshot. And now he's in 1932, and he told this story to Jim. And then Jim told the story to the narrator, and the narrator's telling us. And boy, is that confusing when it doesn't tell you who the speaker is when new paragraphs start. Anyway, went on Jim. He said it was all because the cities had spread so. Boston spread south, Washington north, and York City spread all over, and the cities between grew into them. And it was all one vast machine. It was perfectly ordered and perfectly neat. They had a transportation system. that took me up. See, he's gone back into the narrative, and I'm in the wrong voice again. Anyway, went on Jim. And then we're the 3059 guy. He said it was all because the city... See, now we're fourth hand. Because... Sorry, what was the guy's name? Henlon. Aries. Okay, so our narrator is Bart. Or not. Yep. I don't know who our narrator is. Yeah, we don't have a name for our narrator. So we have the narrator. Then we have Jim. Then we have Aries. And so at this point in the story, Aries is telling Jim is telling our narrator something that was told to Aries by someone from 7 million years in the future. So we have narrator, or we have first-hand person telling Aries, who told Jim, who told the narrator, who's telling us. It's ARES. Very confusing with the... We can't trust any of this. It's fourth-hand knowledge at this point. Let's see. And it was all one vast machine. It was perfectly ordered and perfectly neat. They had a transportation system that took me from North End to the South End in 3 minutes. I timed it. They had learned to neutralize acceleration. And then I took one of the great space liners to Neptune. There were still some running. Some people, you see, were coming the other way. The ship was huge. Mostly it was a freight liner. It floated up from Earth, a great metal cylinder, 3/4 of a mile long and 1/4 of a mile in diameter. Outside the atmosphere, it began to accelerate. I could see Earth dwindle. I have ridden one of our own liners to Mars, and it took me in 3048, 5 days. In half an hour on this liner, Earth was just a star, with a smaller, dimmer star near it. In an hour, we passed Mars. 8 hours later, we landed on Neptune. Marine was the city, large as the York City of my day, and no one living there. The planet was cold and dark, horribly cold. The sun was a tiny, pale disk, heatless and almost lightless, but the city was perfectly comfortable. The air was fresh and cool, moist with the scent of growing blossoms, perfumed with them. And the whole giant metal framework trembled just slightly with the humming, powerful beat of the mighty machines that had made and cared for it. I learned from records I deciphered because of my knowledge of the ancient tongue that their tongue was based on, and the tongue of that day when man was dying, that the city was built 3,730,150 years after my birth. Not a machine had been touched by the hand of man since that day. Yet the air was perfect for man, and the warm rose-silver glow hung in the air here and supplied the only illumination. Oh, what's the song? I heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from you. That's how it goes. I visited some of their other cities where there were men, and there on the retreating outskirts of man's domain, I heard the Song of Longings, as I called it, and another the Song of Forgotten Memories. Listen. He sang another of those songs. There's one thing I know, declared Jim. That bewildered note was stronger in his voice. And by that time, I guess I pretty well understood his feelings. Because you have to remember, I heard it only secondhand from an ordinary man, and Jim had heard it from an eye and ear witness that was not ordinary and heard it in that organ voice. Anyway, I guess Jim was right when he said he wasn't an ordinary man. No ordinary man could think of those songs. They weren't right. When he sang that song, it was full of I think the narrator's talking. I don't know. When he sang that song, it was full of more of those plaintive minors. Feel him searching his mind for something he had forgotten, something he desperately wanted to remember, something he knew he should have known, and I felt it eternally elude him. I felt it get further and further away from him as he sang. I heard that lonely, frantic searcher attempting to recall that thing that would save him. Sorry, it's Jim talking. He switches narrators without telling you very often. And I heard him give a little sob of defeat and the song ended. Jim tried a few notes. He hasn't a good ear for music, but that was too powerful to forget. Just a few hummed notes. Jim hasn't much imagination, I guess. Or when that man of the future sang to him, he would have gone mad. It shouldn't be sung by modern men. It isn't meant for them. You've heard those heartrending cries some animals give, like human cries almost. A loon. Now, he sounds like a lunatic being murdered horribly. That's just unpleasant. That song made you feel just exactly what the singer meant. Because it didn't just sound human. It was human. It was the essence of humanity's last defeat, I guess. You always feel sorry for the chap who loses after trying hard. Well, you could feel the whole of humanity trying hard and losing. And you knew they couldn't afford to lose, because they couldn't try again. He said he'd been interested before, and still not wholly upset by those machines that couldn't stop. But that was too much for him. I knew after that, he said, that these weren't men I could live among. They were dying men, and I was alive with the youth of my race. They looked at me with the same longing, hopeless wonder with which they looked at the stars and the machines. They knew what I was, but couldn't understand. I began to work on leaving. Oh, cool. We'll finish it. It'll run us a little over time, but there's not that much left. It took 6 months. It was hard because my instruments were gone, of course, and theirs didn't read in the same units. And there were few instruments anyway. The machines didn't read instruments, they acted on them. They were sensory organs to them. But Rayo Lantal helped where he could, and I came back. I did just one thing before I left that may help. I may even try to get back there sometime to see, you know? I said they had machines that could really... I said they had machines that could really think, but that someone had stopped them a long time ago, and no one knew how to start them. I found some records and deciphered them. I started one of the latest and best of them, and started in on a great problem. It is only fitting it should be done. The machine can work on it, not for 1,000 years, but for 1,000,000 if it must. Started 5 of them, actually, and connected them together as the records directed. It's deep think, or deep thought. They are trying to make a machine with something man had lost. It sounds rather comical. But stop to think before you laugh. And remember that Earth as I saw it from the ground level of Neva City, just before Reo Lantal threw the switch. Twilight. The sun has set. The desert out beyond in its mystic changing colors. The great metal city rising straight-walled to the human city above, broken by spires and towers and great trees with scented blossoms. The silvery rose glow in paradise of gardens above. And all the great city structure throbbing and humming to the steady, gentle beat of perfect, deathless machines built more than 3 million years before, and never touched since that time by human hands. And they go on. The dead city. The men that have lived and hoped and built and died to leave behind them those little men who can only wonder and look and long for a forgotten kind of companionship. They wander through the vast cities their ancestors built, knowing less of it than the machines themselves. And the songs. Those tell the story best, I think. Little, hopeless, wandering men amid vast, unknowing, blind machines that started 3 million years before and just never knew how to stop. They are dead and can't die and be still. So I brought another machine to life and set it to a task which, in time to come, it will perform. I ordered it to make a machine which would have what man had lost. A curious machine. And then I wanted to leave quickly and go back. I had been born in the first full light of man's day. I did not belong in the lingering dying glow of man's twilight. So I came back. A little too far back. But it will not take me long to return accurately this time. Well, that was his story, Jim said. He didn't tell me it was true, didn't say anything about it. And he had me thinking so hard I didn't even see him get off in Reno when we stopped for gas. But he wasn't an ordinary man, repeated Jim in a rather belligerent tone. Jim claims he doesn't believe the yarn, but he does. That's why he always acts so determined about it when he says he wasn't an ordinary man. No, he wasn't, I guess. I think he lived and died, too, probably, sometime in the 31st century. And I think he saw the twilight of the race, too. It's an interesting story. I definitely can see why it has why it was singled out to get an award from the Science Fiction Writers Association or whatever, even though it was written before the Nebula Awards were started. It was part of a list of stories that they honored that had been published before the awards were started. And I can definitely see why. It's got something to it. And it definitely has, it's got some themes that are fairly common in science fiction, even to today, with the dying of man, the loss of knowledge over time as man becomes more dependent on the machines, the idea of having a curious machine. Like, I definitely see little bits of like, not to say that this is a direct inspiration for Wall-E, but things that were introduced in this story, things that this story brought to the genre, brought forth, the themes that are there are in Wall-E, the movie with the curious robot that lives among the dead leavings of man's past. Yeah, the next generation is the downfall of man vibes. So there's that. It hints at like man's ascendancy, and it talks about like humanity having resolved cultural differences and spread out across the whole of the solar system. It's interesting that he talked about like 10th dimensional space-time. That was interesting. The 10-dimensional space-time. Or 15. I think he said 15, didn't he? I don't remember. That surprised me a little for 1934. The whole idea of overtime species that had not been a problem came to be viewed as a problem and then were made extinct until the point where all they had left was houseplants. Apparently dogs got smart enough to drive cars for auto racing. That was interesting. I don't think that one shows up in too much other science fiction. But anyway. Okay. I think, that is where we are going to have to call it. The story's done. Again, definitely worthy of some praise. Not a story that we know as the story itself, but the themes, I can see why he called it classic. Once again, that's number 9, and I think all of them have stood up to the classic sort of label. They've all been really strong. The next one that we have next time, which I think isn't until early July, just because of how things time out, will be The Mole Pirate, the one that the artwork is for on the cover of this issue. So that's what we will look at the next time that we do this. The next episode of Archival Adventures, next Wednesday, will be the one I had to cancel because the weather was making my sinuses try to kill me. So we will finally be finishing the USS Dakota Engineers Journal, the Sam Peltz Journal, the Civil War Union Navy Engineers Journal. And so that is what we'll do next week. And then the week after, it's Project Gemini. So hopefully those sound interesting, because they should. They will be. Uh, um, okay, let's see. We should raid somewhere. Let me take a quick peek to see who is around. Oh, actually less than normal. So yeah, we're gonna head over to Stephen Joyce, who is presently doing puzzles, which, you know, it's Stephen and Stephen is puzzles. So that makes sense. But yeah, we'll head over to Stephen Joyce for some blueprints. And let me just set up the raid. I will say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope that if this was your first time, you'll stop by again in the future. I hope I'll see all of you again soon. But until I do, I hope that you will keep exploring history. Thanks. Bye.